about entertaining preschoolers questions, unlocking our children's potential through inquiry-based learning how curiosity cultivates problem solving and sparks creativity. So there you go. So I'll show you our flow. So we're going to talk about what what is inquiry-based learning. And did you know that there are actually four kinds of inquiry? How to provoke these kinds of questions from children, because there are simple questions such as why is your hair black? It could be answered as quickly as because my mom's hair is black. But there are even more deeper ways to unlock scientific exploration within one small question like that. So I'm going to show you what kinds of inquiry methods we can introduce to our children so we can spark these sciences, maths, arts, creative sciences, problem solving. And we're also going to talk about the pros and cons of this kind of method, how it's more than just asking a question. And towards the end, I will be showing you some samples and how to implement them in different complexities. So if you're going to teach them to younger groups, I'm going to teach you how, I'm going to show you how. If you're going to do it with older groups, I'm also going to show you some photos of how to do it in your classroom or maybe at your home if you're doing home learning program with your children. So let's begin. So what is inquiry-based learning? So it's an educational approach that centers around fostering curiosity and encouraging students to actively participate in the learning process by asking questions and exploring topics that interest them. So this method goes beyond the traditional rote memorization, and it promotes critical thinking, problem solving, and a deeper understanding of whatever they're interested about. So, here are some key aspects and examples of inquiry based learning. So, curiosity will be your children's driving force. So, in an inquiry based learning, a teacher or an adult would encourage students or their children to ask questions about the world around them. So, these questions will become the starting point of their exploration and their investigation. So, it's okay to use these big words with the children because as you show them the process, they will get the gist of what investigation and exploration would mean. So, for example, instead of simply teaching about ecosystems, a teacher might ask students what they wonder about how living organisms interact in a specific environment. So you can relate that to um, relationships that they can understand, such as how does a student relate to a teacher, or how does a teacher relate to perhaps a janitor, or how does a janitor relate to perhaps a school administrator. And then you relate it to how they understand those relationships with newer concepts such as living organisms. So it would lead to an inquiry into ecosystems, not just what we can find in the world, but with what they can observe around them. Second, student-centered exploration. So students take an active role in their learning, researching, experimenting, and collaborating to find answers to their own questions. So for example, in science class, students might design and conduct experiments to understand the scientific method rather than just reading about it in a textbook. Aside from that, when we encourage inquiry-based learning, we um we emphasize real world relevance because it's not a new question within children to ask what does this, how important is this in the real world. For example, there are people who would be questioning the importance of, let's say, abstract math like Pythagorean theorem, if you're familiar with that one. If you don't appreciate the the context of that in the real world, you might not be as curious to learn about it. So, inquiry based learning often connects these classroom concepts to real world scenarios and making education more meaningful and applicable. So, for example, when studying histories, students might investigate primary sources or conduct interviews with local community leaders or members to understand the impact of historical events on their area. So, it's also teaching your students on how to do proper research. I mean, where are the avenues that are, you know, that are legitimate for them and makes them, wonder more and dive more, which ones they weigh, and it prompts their critical thinking. There you go. The problem solving skills. Students develop problem solving skills as they encounter these challenges and obstacles during their inquiries, and it will foster resilience and adaptability because it's not all the time that when you dive into research you will find an answer. Sometimes you will encounter some roadblocks and it will be frustrating. And giving these moments of frustration, these small moments of frustration, exposing our children to them will foster resilience and make them more adaptable to real world problems that they will be encountering in the future or in the workforce. So, for example, in math class, students might explore a real world problem such as optimizing a budget or redesigning a structure. Maybe they see a building and then they rethink how else can we make this building more functional for everybody in the community, applying mathematical concepts to find solutions, so and so. In relation to that, they would also learn how to collaborate and communicate because since they are the ones asking their own questions, the students would be working together to explore the topics and share their findings because children in the same group might have similar interests, such as, for example, if one person might be into bugs, it might spark an interest with other children learning more about butterflies in specific, or maybe crawling creepies, or maybe they're going to diaper into more smaller microorganisms such as cells and so. But for example, another example would be in language arts class, children might collaborate on a research project, sharing their insights and perspectives on a chosen literary work. And last of all, um, children would be able to reflect on their learning experiences if they are the ones who are actually um, starting it. They would be able to evaluate their understanding and the effectiveness of their process because they were the ones who sparked their own question. Towards the end, there would be a reflective process guided by the teacher, of course, and the adult about the process that they just embarked on. So was it a process that worked? Is it a process that you can do again, or is there some tweaking that needs to be done? So the child would have this process in their mind, reevaluating their own decision in a safe context, which is the classroom. So for example, after completing a project, after students show their evaluations and findings to the class, they could reflect on what they've learned and how their understanding of the topic has evolved, or if they have found new avenues of how to, you know, look for look for answers. Because in traditional learning, students are often simply told what the outcome is expected to be and then are shown evidence to prove that this is the case, right? This is how I learned too at school. But in inquiry based learning, students take learning into their own hands. So we should be encouraging with the process and tell them that there are no wrong results. Like there really isn't anything wrong. Like if you find a roadblock, it just means there are other avenues to choose from. So instead, everything else that they find out is still useful. So children will get to evaluate for themselves if the results that they find are useful and helpful, and they would be able to value the effort that they put into their work. So a simple example would be if the children were to ask the tallest block tower possible, they may come together to think about ways to make this tower tall and stable. For example, the pasta and marshmallow tower. So this would consist of putting as much pasta to keep a marshmallow afloat, or using just a marshmallow to center all the pasta, building the highest possible tower that you can make. Then they will think about how to make it stable, then proceed to test out their ideas with with the materials that you give, and then maybe in the future, if it really sparks their interest, they might even start building it with real blocks. So as towers inevitably fall and fail, teachers may ask the children, why do you think it fell? What do you think we could do better to fix this problem? So in a traditional learning situation, teachers may present information to students explaining how buildings are constructed, what methods are used to keep them stable. But this is more of a spoon feeding session with facts without having the chance to test children's theories for themselves. So we're giving our children the space to fail with this inquiry method. So there are several key characteristics of inquiry-based learning, and these are most of it. So it is student-centered, it is problem-based, it involves collaboration, it promotes critical thinking, it is open-ended, and it can provoke reflection and evaluation. So what are the four kinds of inquiry? So there is the structured approach that serves as a foundational method for teaching students how to pose questions and explore real-world problems systematically. So this is typically employed in science classes, where students are presented with a specific problem and guided through the specific process to discover viable solutions. So the scientific method, they will follow this sequential approach. And not only does it instill essential scientific inquiry skills, but it also provides a structured framework for understanding and applying the scientific method. The second kind of inquiry method is the open-ended one. So in contrast to the structured inquiry approach, um, the open-ended inquiry approach offers students and a more flexible and exploratory learning environment. This is more of what usually happens in a preschool environment where children don't have such a rigid curriculum to follow yet. So if your curriculum in your community or in your country allows a preschool to, you know, focus more on their gross motor skills, fine motor skills, what more way to make it useful for them once they transfer to primary school than offer them an open-ended inquiry where they will be empowered to ask their own questions and they will be empowered to ask for help. So in older classes, this approach is commonly utilized in humanities classes. It will it will grant students the freedom to delve into their interests, ask questions, and thoroughly explore a given topic. So the focus here is in-depth exploration, encouraging students to debate various viewpoints, and fostering a sense of autonomy in their learning journey. So the third approach would be problem-based inquiry approach. This approach revolves around real world problem solving. So it could be you're showing a news article to your students and it could pose a question to them that if you were a world leader, what would you do? So it would make it particularly relevant in mathematics and engineering classes where children can deal with authentic problems that require application of their more so that they acquire more knowledge that would help them find practical solutions with this problem that you have presented. So this approach not only reinforces theoretical concepts but also equips students with the skills needed to address challenges beyond the classroom. So preparing them for the complexities of real world problem solving. So you can use this third approach, with older classes, maybe in the tertiary level already. And lastly, there's the guided inquiry approach, where it is a teacher-led method, but you will navigate your students through an inquiry process, providing structured guidance as they ask questions and seek solutions to real world problems. So this is more on the lower side of classrooms like elementary and middle school, that because it ensures that students receive the necessary support to develop inquiry skills progressively. So there are children that are not naturally, they did not naturally grow up to be inquisitive because maybe at the early parts of their childhood and early development, they were not really encouraged to ask questions, or maybe in their household there's not much communication around going, so they don't observe that kind of interaction. That's why it's not natural for them to ask questions. So this is a really good approach for them. So teachers would be acting as facilitators, steering students toward a deeper understanding of the subject matter while nurturing their curiosity and critical thinking abilities. Now, inquiry-based instruction, with its focus on critical thinking and creative problem solving, offers significant advantages for teachers, particularly in early childhood education, because this approach would really mold well when you start them young, because when you start them like really young, they don't feel that shame yet that primary students already have, or they don't feel that embarrassment that teens would often have in raising questions in the classroom, or maybe the pride that college or university students have when interacting with some of their professors. So some of the benefits of this method would be curriculum reinforcement. So after teaching a core concept tied to the curriculum, teachers may apply this approach to enhance retention and um, evaluate children's understanding. So this method would help you see if the children grasp the problem's context in its development and why a specific solution is ineffective. So you would also be able to see their perspective, their understanding on the curriculum that you just introduced to them. Also, it is much more rewarding to the class, as it encourages curiosity, because children are seeking their own answers much more independently. It will be more fulfilling for them once they receive the answer. It's just like a eureka moment, like for example when you suddenly solve something that you've been pondering about, and then suddenly you want to share it with everybody that you know. That's about the same feeling that children also feel when they're able to answer their own questions. So they would have intuition and self-reliance, and they would be less, or should I say they would be more secure towards their confidence and their abilities to solve their own problems. Now, the core of this methodology is to empower and guide children to learn independently and to foster confidence and self-trust. But there are drawbacks such as impacts on standardized test scores, because even if we are, encouraging this kind of method, being open-ended, letting children ask their own questions, it may not align well with standardized tests if they do try for accreditation, or if they want to apply for scholarships. Sometimes these scholarships ask for numbers that they can see. And if your school is only providing letter grades connected to this kind of learning, um your child might not be able to express themselves as well when it comes to standardized test scores, and it might potentially affect their scores. um Secondly, it will have potential discomfort for some children, because this is a very bold ask to children, because it relies on an active child participation. But not all children are, comfortable in being very loud in discussion, brainstorming. Shy children, or maybe those children in the autism spectrum, may not thrive in this environment if it's part of a big group. Additionally, incorrect answers might cause unintentional embarrassment, and it would hinder future participation. Now, for teachers, some would find this method less structured than what they're accustomed to, because it really focuses on a big idea, and getting questions and having your students answer it themselves without spoon feeding them, but also guiding them at the same time. So balancing classroom control while meaningfully engaging with students can pose a challenge for teachers, requiring adequate preparation. And this is a luxury not all educators have, especially with, the different policies of different school administrators. It's really not very realistic for all educators to have that kind of time to prepare a very lengthy and very um ready curriculum for a child to explore. So in summary, while inquiry-based learning offers valuable benefits in fostering critical thinking skills and independence, it's essential to consider potential drawbacks such as impacts on standardized testing and challenges for certain students and teachers. So just as what I mentioned a while ago, it is more than just asking, more than letting a child ask what he wants to know. It's about triggering curiosity, and activating a student's curiosity is actually very, very complex and very, very difficult. Much more complex than just mere delivering information. So, despite this complexity, this kind of learning can be easier on teachers, partly because it transfers some responsibilities from teachers to students, but mostly releasing authority engages students. So teachers who uses this approach should combat the I don't know the don't know moment of children, because this is a chronic problem for children who are not that engaged in discussion. Even if you try to be as lively, as energetic, if a child doesn't, if they don't, if they feel like they don't care, they would just say, I don't know, I don't know. They won't engage. So when you want a student to ask something like a big question, a front-loaded inquiry-based question, you should have something such as a provocation. So what is a provocation? Let me show you. A provocation is this is often a term with inquiry-based learning, but it is also related to other philosophies such as Waldorf, Reggio Emilia. These spaces aim to elicit a response from students, be it a question, a sense of wonder, a thought, or a feeling of curiosity. So these indicators of engagement are the desired outcomes of provocations, which are crafted to generate excitement and stimulate students' thoughts about what comes next. So various types of provocations exist, providing various avenues to pique students' interests and prepare them for upcoming learning experiences. Because compared to just asking or posing a question, just showing them a picture or maybe relating it to a past experience. Sometimes a child would be more engaged when they see something more concrete, something that they can actually touch, something they can smell, something that they can zoom into in real life and be curious about it. Because it's not just little children who are more engaged when there is, tactile involvement. It's also um high school students. When you show a high school student something such as this one on the table, even if they say they're not interested, you would see them looking and peeking through the table, what's on in there, and they may not show any engagement because sometimes they are prideful as they are learning to deal with their emotions. But when they go home, maybe they'll do a quick search over the internet, and on the next class, you may have some questions popping up already. So there isn't a specific template for provocation, but what I can say is that teachers can draw inspiration from intriguing examples that they might have or you might have observed in your classroom. So when planning or setting up a provocation, several factors should be considered. Firstly, the grade level, of course, it plays a crucial role as what engages kindergarten students may not resonate effectively with fifth graders. Additionally, the choice of provocations is influenced by the available materials and space, prompting educators to make the most of their resources. Um, Importantly, provocations don't have to be elaborate. They simply need to fulfill a purpose. So here are some tips for preparing a successful provocation. So you begin with a question in mind. So what is the purpose of this? It's not just to elicit a wow moment in the classroom, right? It's thinking about how natural learning will flow with a simple output, with a simple provocation, with a simple setup. And what is the essential question, or what do your students want to know initially, and how does this setup connect with that one? So planning these things out ahead of time will ensure that you will get the most out of your provocation. So learning about what your students enjoy, maybe hobbies you can incorporate. It doesn't even have to be in the classroom. Provocation could be a walk in the park, maybe a guest or maybe a parent guest, maybe a parent has a similar job to whatever you're diving into. For example, you're diving into the structure of a building and you may want to consult with um your student's father that's already an architect or an engineer. So it also um encourages family engagement and community involvement inside the classroom. So you have to think about what activities your children would naturally into, what would they see around themselves. So you decide how much control your students will have. So your provocation should largely be left for students to explore with minimal intervention from you. So once you set up that table, you're hands off already most of the time. You will just let it be there and let the students explore whatever it is that you put there. And when you find students are engaged and using it up, you just replenish until the day that you have to, until the day you get them to ask, or you bring up the topic again, and they might be starting to ask more questions. And chances are they'll surprise you with the questions, because what you might see as your perspective, as your perspective of an adult, might not be the same of what they see. Maybe they see something else with what you have set up, and it would open new topics and further branches of learning that you may be delving throughout the course of the week. So you would be considering the flow also. So where do you think your students are likely to begin? What questions do you think they might have? So when you plan the natural progression that will happen as students work through their questions and um, wonderings, you provide opportunities for them to branch off and explore um, separate interests when it arises. So you tie the provocation into the curriculum and ensure that subsequent activities not only have relevance to just the students, but also that they're connected to the curriculum as well. Make sure that you are threading standards into your provocation and follow up learning activities. So here are some examples of how to spark those kind of questions inside the classroom. So first would be a wonder wall. So this is the easiest one. Whatever you're discussing, when you're at week zero, which means you haven't started your curriculum yet, you are still trying to know your students, interviewing them, talking with them during snack time, break time, or asking other teachers about them, then you may start making a wonder wall. Like you have the agency to put their names, or it could be a very anonymous one, and then you can just put it there in the classroom, and children would just pass by it and take a peek. Maybe as they see it through the week, they will start to look more into the details. So these wonder walls are fun spaces in the classrooms that are devoted to students' work, questions that they have, and things that they are curious about. So these are just examples. Some people have put whiteboards, some people have put um letter stamps so that children can actually make it really nice. Some of them just write and then paste it, and then everyone can try to read. So it also reinforces the importance of handwriting, importance of how to construct your sentences in your mind, and if it comes across the way you want it to come across when it's in writing. Because sometimes children just write sentences mindlessly. And then when they give it to someone else, they will be like, no, 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 that's not what I meant about it. So they will have these experiences as well. when you have wonder walls created by students for the students. So they will in writing their ideas down, they are also less likely to forget them. So you can begin these wonder walls as early as the beginning of the year. And it's a great idea to keep, updating it until the end of the year. So the children would feel also the sense of time that as time is passing through, we are learning more and more, asking more questions and having discovering new more topics, and they will have a sense of accomplishment at the end of the year. So that's my first example, a wonder wall. So next one would be a more complex one. This is an observation table. So an observation table is appropriate for maybe the lower school, primary grades like first to third grade, because there are so many beautiful, unique examples of observation tables. These are areas where students have a chance to explore materials related to their topic or inquiry. So not only can these objects be hand selected by teachers from resources, but they can also be from objects from home. So when you are connecting with parents during parent teacher conferences, um parents can also bring, what could be junk in their home, maybe treasure in your classroom. So students may be also tasked to find objects that are related to the topic. For example, you can make it a homework that today, class, please pick up the greenest leaf nearby your home. Then, when they bring it the next day, they can compare the different shades of green and you can put it on the observation table where everyone can take a peek. Why is your leaf greener? Why is mine a little yellow? Or is it because you live in the shade? Or is it because you live near the creek? So they will have these comparisons that will strike even more deeper questions, such as why is a leaf green anyway? What makes a leaf green? Is it the light it's exposed to? Is it the water that it has? Is it the access of water it has? Is it because it there could even be very silly answers or questions, such as is it because my mom said I talk to the plants, so the plants are happy, that's why they're green. And then it could be a science question also. Is there a truth in talking to plants that make them flourish some more? Right? Because these are not just questions asked by children. These are also big ideas that are being pondered on by plant lovers. Because some of my friends who love plants actually believe that talking to their plants make their plants happier and healthier. So maybe there is a science to that. So these are some of the questions that we encourage our children to explore in an inquiry-based method. So at these tables, students construct, they can fiddle, they can observe, they can write, they can, whatever is available to you. You don't have to necessarily spend on things, especially when you have a community that is thriving in objects, sharing. You could even start um a group in your community where you would have like material switches, like for example, hello teachers, I have like a whole can of this, would you want to exchange it for this and that? And then it could be like a barter trade between whatever. So other materials to supplement any observation table could include magnifying glasses, clipboards and paper, possibly an iPad if you have an extra one for students to use. There could also be wonder windows where you can just label a random window a wonder window. So if you're currently talking about the weather, if you want your children to explore about clouds, then just make it very fun for them to look outside and observe what they can see in the sky. So you can just put like a random outline over the window, and then you will say, today, starting today, this will be our wonder window. When you look outside, you will see lots of wonders in the clouds. And then your children will be starting to, look outside and just um interact with their friends, collaborate with whatever they observe, and then on in the discussion they would be sharing this one. So students can observe, sketch, write everything in this observation table. So you can also place related books or photographs for older children, for students to continue reading, continue their learning, finding out more, maybe learning a new word that they might want to embark on. So there's also treasure boxes. So this is kind of related to observation table, but this is more contained, I would say. So it's just a fun addition to have in a classroom, a very small area with box where at the beginning, um, it could be something very enticing to them. Like you could say, next week we would have a new treasure box at the corner. So when Monday comes, all of your children are excited to come inside and check out what's new in the treasure box. So it could be filled with interesting materials such as photos, or maybe just twigs just like these, unknown items, postcards, pieces of art from the past year, from your past class. So these are commonly referred to as loose parts, and they are a great way to inspire creativity and wonder. So some other examples of loose parts include straws, corks, cardboard scraps, beads, popsicle sticks, and anything else that students can find and fiddle with and explore. So you can actually transform these boxes into STEM cards. So for example, before I worked in a Reggio Emilia school, so we gather things such as empty bottles because we were the ones providing children their daily food. So comes with that is a lot of junk, such as milk cartons, um, juice bottles. Then we would collect these items, wash them, and then just put them all inside a box and call it a treasure box. This is a box where you can take an object and create it into anything that you might want to. So you might want to give children access to hot glue guns, crafting scissors, other materials that you trust them to use. So it also depends on their age bracket. So during their free build time, they can create unique pieces that would then be used to display all over the classroom. Now, each and every child's work would be displayed and will then on and in turn would spark curiosity with other children. So these can also serve as connections between topics and students. So for example, upon pulling out an old letter from a treasure box, for example, you find your treasure box now is inspired by old letters, love letters, or like postcards sent to family. And a student might remember that his uncle gave him a postcard before, or that maybe someone would have a story about their grandma and their grandpa writing letters to each other during the war. So the student might want to bring in some of those letters to share with the class, and then the class may create a scrapbook and collaborate um about a treasure box that they can share it to the other class, and the other class might want to barter with them, and then they can share ideas. So it can spark different ideas for different classes as well. And this is one of my favorite ones. This is shadow play. So shadow play basically is what it is. So you place materials and play with light to spark curiosities. For example, for these this sand here, it's just simple. You may think that the child is simply drawing, but in in touching the sand and looking at the light, they may start to wonder how many granules of sand can sit on the tip of my finger. Then you can zoom in on that on mathematical concepts such as estimation, or even include bigger terms that they haven't encountered yet, such as millions and trillions. Or if your topic has human anatomy, you can actually show them copies of X-rays where when you put the light on it, of course, it's basically the same thing as just printing it out black and white, but the wonder of having to see it like this makes you feel, I mean, makes them feel like they're an expert looking at the bones on the table. So this will give them more engagement in the classroom. Same as when you show them the leaves this way with the light. It's just a different way to show them the things that they already see around them. Paint as well, um let them let them see how it visualizes from a light perspective on a light box like this. So you have to be receptive to the unexpected, and be open to whatever your child or your children will say or ask about, because in this approach, we are encouraging them to ask as much questions as possible. So let me just go back and show you the 4 steps um, to inquiry-based learning, because we kind of skipped over that part. So triggering inquiry, as I said, aside from provocation, is about learning something new and triggering curiosity, no matter how small. It takes modeling enthusiasm, and learning something new generates our own enthusiasm, even if it's something new about the content we've covered for years. So you imagine you are a little detective with a magnifying glass. Um, Inquiry-based learning is like solving a mystery by asking questions and looking for clues and sharing what you find with your friends. So instead of just being told the answers, you get to discover them on your own. So as in an adult's perspective, you may think like you're clicking through, for example, Twitter or X or Facebook feed, and you stumble on a link and you realize that it's a new factoid, a new perspective on an age-old topic. So maybe it's a TED talk or a graph with statistics, something that sparks your curiosity, makes a concept more concrete. Maybe it's an infographic or a photo or something that startles you and leads you to furrow your brow and say, well, by the way, I think one of the reasons why the whole world seems to be um very hyped about this one is because the power of learning something new is undeniable. So you have to bring that feeling of what into your classroom. You have to model your own curiosity quotient, that hunger to learn. So this is how to, it's just simple 4 steps. So you can follow this method so you can orient them with what the curriculum is offering them. So we are to learn about trees. So what do you know about trees? You question. That's when you encourage them to ask questions. What do you know about trees? What do you want to learn about trees? What would happen if there are no trees in the world? You develop a problem statement. So you give them something to solve. So students develop questions they should develop questions that they are hungry to answer. So have them develop a problem statement that requires them to pitch their question using a constructed response. For example, if you are an art teacher, so it's different. You can integrate science and art together by having your students create their own paint. So for example, in art class, you can show them how to follow a specific um, paint making recipe. In the second class, they can create a paint that they think will suit them more. So with the recipe that you gave them, you give them freedom to tweak it and to make them um, redesign the paint formulation fit to their needs as an artist. So this is where the student-driven inquiry will come in. So what kind of paint would your child want to create? So to guide your students in this activity, for example, you can ask, how did you make this paint fit your needs, and what were your needs that you wanted to target in making this paint? If you were a scientist, how are you going to change or modify this paint so that it works for everybody else? What was your reaction upon testing out the first stroke of paint that you tried out? Did it turn the way you wanted it to? So, encouraged by these questions, a student will feel that their work is interesting and that they can, create something. And now students or children may begin asking questions such as like, what do I want to create? Why did I make this kind of paint? Why did I make a paint that's so thick? Or why did I make paint that is thin or chunky? Is it an artistic effect that I'm going for? Is this something that people have been using? Is it something that can be shared with the community? So you have to form your questions to your students the right way as well. So you're not really taking over their creative process, but helping that process. So you know how student generated questions um encourage them to explore and experiment on their own. So regarding this, you show them how to research. So upon exploration, you let them question it again. So it's crucial to have some of this be classwork, like legitimate classwork, so students have access to the head researcher in the room, which is you. So you aren't going to do the work for them, but you're going to guide them and model methods of researching reliably. Once they are able to do some research, you make presentation less daunting for them by making it a normal thing. So even if it is a big idea that you're exploring inside the room, don't make it into a contest of who wins and who doesn't, because as I said earlier, this is not um this is not a method where children are bound to hit a stop. Like when they do hit a stop, they should have the avenue to like branch through other options that they're able to see and use this stop as an information that, hey, that's not where I'm going. Okay, I'll try a different way. So let's just make it light, especially for the younger ones. So let's not make it a very daunting experience for them. And towards the end, you help them reflect on the process. So as children discover and learn things independently, they gain confidence in their abilities and have a sense of accomplishment. So lastly, how do you know if an inquiry-based learning is working? How do you know if it's working? Well, while it remains a and robust method, teachers or educators may seek indicators to gauge its effectiveness. So here are some ways to discern if your method is working, if your child is showing organization, such as developing a work plan to guide task completion, if your child is able to manage their time effectively, such as utilizing plans to efficiently complete tasks, independently gathering resources, so they're taking in charge of their own learning, building relationships by collaborating with their friends, um, knowing when to ask for help, approaching their tasks positively, etc., etc. So these are the things that you will be seeing if you are implementing this inquiry-based learning for quite a while already. So of course, in the beginning, it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be very challenging. You might feel that the space to learn is too big, it's too broad, that it's very daunting as well to you as an educator. But once you get the hang of it and you see the effects of it to your children and you hear about it from their parents in the future once they are in, for example, secondary school or in university, and once they start expressing themselves to the approach that they learned um in their early years, then you will see that while these indicators offer insight into the success of inquiry-based learning, other signs may also emerge. So regularly check in with your students and their families. Adaptability to their feedback remain crucial in ensuring the effectiveness of this approach in your classroom. So that's it. We're towards the end already of our talk. Um, I'm really happy that everyone has joined um with me today. So I will just conclude everything that we have learned for today. So